Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Freeman. I'm the Associate Director of Madea, and I'm really excited to be here in Seattle because I'm from Austin, Texas, and I'm really tired of sweating. And so this is actually the first moment that I've been able to put on a jacket and need to have a jacket on in about 6 months. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the Madea, the Marcus Institute for Digital Education and the Arts. Madea is a partnership between the new Media Consortium and the Edward and Betty Marcus Foundation. It began in 2005 with the goals of providing systemic support to art museums, professional development, and learning with an entire region. So our region is Texas, which is a really big region when you think about it. We have many, many members in Texas. Actually, we have 49 members, of which 37 are Texas-based museums, and 12 are partners that we've worked with over the years, like SF MoMA, the Minneapolis Institute of the Arts, the Met, and other major technology museums, art museums. So Madea provides timely, succinct, and practical knowledge about emerging technologies that museums can use to advance their missions. Primarily we do that as a digital hub. So in 2010, Madea formed. So this partnership between the NMC and the Edward and Betty Marcus Foundation became the Marcus Institute for Digital Education and the Arts. And it was a digital hub where people, ideas, tools, and resources came together. So unlike a museum, we don't have a physical presence. You don't come in and look at our collection. Our organization primarily lives in the digital community. We have a website at mcn.edu. And on that website, you'll find blogs. We have expert bloggers, technologists. This is a latest blog from Lori Bird Phillips. We also have Miss Holly Witchey is one of our bloggers in residence. So you'll be able to find that. That's a key part of our website. The other thing that we do is we provide hands-on workshops. We do professional development opportunities for museums. And so you may recognize that gentleman. That's Scott Sayer, and he's going to be at our next workshop. We are focusing on tablets as for our workshop because a lot of the museums that we've been working with have been working with iPads. And so we want to kind of get the state of iPads at this point, since many members have been able to utilize them and start some programs around them. So we're bringing Scott in, and Coven Smith will be there. And so we'll have a group of about 50 people in Austin kind of going over this new technology. The other thing we do is Madea Connect sessions, which are a series of webinars. We started that in 2010, and we're reigniting that this year. And so our first speaker is going to be Liz Neely, and she's going to talk about 3D printing. That's a really hot topic right now, and I'm really interested in just providing some of our members kind of an introduction to the vocabulary around it and kind of what are some possibilities with it. But we have some other exciting webinars coming up too. Coven Smith is going to do a webinar. We have Jack Ludden and Don Undine. And in the past, we've had Nina Simon and Nancy Proctor. So major museum technologists, giving some practical advice to our member base. And now I'm going to turn it over to Holly.
You hear a lot about Madea because Madea with NMC are the joint founders the joint funders and supporters of the Horizon Report Museum Edition. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the advisory board. The Horizon Report for Museums is a group effort. We have an advisory board of between 40 and 43 people. I meant to go online and count everyone who is there. And there are a couple of advisory board members in the audience. Raise your hands if you were an advisory board member this year. Yay, thank you so much. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow PIs on this project, Larry Johnson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the new Media Consortium, and our own Coven Smith, Director of Technology at the Denver Museum of Art, composer and drummer, and all-around Renaissance man. Oops, I can go forward. The Horizon Report currently exists in 27 editions and 37 translations, of which the Museum Horizon Report is just one. And I have to let this little animation run its course because it's in my contract. It has a global audience, and these are some of the kinds of Horizon reports that we are currently participating in. But of course, we're here today to talk primarily about the Horizon Report for museums. In the past, we've launched the Horizon Report here at MCN, but this year we thought we'd try something a little bit different and try to get a little feedback from the MCN participants because you're an important part of this whole process for us. I don't think MCN members have really internalized the place that they play in museums, particularly museums in North America today. The IMLS and the American Alliance of Museum is not really sure how many museums there are in North America, and the number runs somewhere between 15,000 and 19,000 institutions which self-identify as museums. The number of museums, of that number of museums, the group that is big enough to have anyone on staff who can consider themselves as a technologist is very, very small. So you represent an elite group of museums. Even if you're the only technologist, you're the only person who knows anything at all about the 4 computers owned by your little historic house, you're still ahead of about 80% of the museums in North America. And so the Horizon Report is something, all of these Horizon Reports come out of a desire to help communities, to help higher education, to help K through 12, to help museums come to grips with the fast-paced world of technology. At the American Alliance of Museums meeting last year, I was sitting out at a table before a session occurred, and Bruce Wyman, who I think many of you will probably know, Bruce Wyman basically kind of came over the table at me to tell me what he didn't like about the Horizon Report. And after we all pulled back from the table and we set some ground rules, we had an interesting discussion. And Bruce comes out of the big museum, the big art museum. He was at Denver before Coven became the director of technology at Denver. And Bruce, I'm going to quote Bruce here. He said, I want to see more of the museum world taking bigger chances and pushing themselves farther than they do. But we're also an incredibly insular community. When I see mobile listed as a technology for the next few years, I worry that museum folk will aim for a baseline, and then having achieved a mobile project, they'll check that off their list. And what he was essentially saying to me is he feels that there are some directors and administrators out there who get a hold of a Horizon Report and walk into somebody's office and say, we need these 2 this year, we need these 2 in 2 to 3 years, and we need these 2 in 4 to 5 years. And he said, or the other side of the coin, what they might do is hand it to the technology person and say, I don't even want to hear about augmented reality. Don't even talk to me about that because that's not on this year's Horizon. And so Bruce sent me a long email sort of explaining how he felt about things. And we talked with several other people at AAM about this. And the Horizon Report is what it is. It's a chance, it's an opportunity for you or for someone at a museum to dialogue with administrators and board of trustees. It's a chance when someone comes up and says, walks into your office and says, I don't know what this tablet app stuff is or this mobile app stuff is, but we need a mobile app. And at that point you can say, I can tell you what a mobile app is, but why don't you take the Horizon Report and do a little reading? Or can I provide you with a couple of articles that's got some suggestions? Can I send you some links to some people who are doing some mobile apps? It's a volume to engage staff members, administrators, and trustees in a conversation about these technologies that become more important. So Bruce did not really come over the table at me. I want to make that perfectly clear from the beginning. But he gave some very useful feedback. And we want feedback and we welcome feedback. And as I'll say at the end of this presentation, the best way to give us feedback is to go online to the nomination page and nominate yourself to be on the advisory board for the museum report or the higher ed report or whichever one you feel would be your particular bailiwick. Do I get a point for using bailiwick in a sentence? I just think so, okay. How does the Horizon Report work? So the whole shebang, the whole report process takes place in less than a month. In fact, most of it takes place in about 2 weeks. We have a Horizon Project Wiki. It's up now. There's the link to it on the screen. You can go up and see what we did. And the Horizon Wiki, I'll go through the process in a second, but the Wiki is the space where everything occurs. We all work, we don't ever gather together. Everything occurs on that Wiki over a course of a couple of weeks. And here's what the board actually does. The first thing they do is review press clippings. We have this wide swath of press clippings about everything you can imagine that has to do with technology. And basically, this is the warm-up. This is the time when we say, it's okay to take a few hours, to take a day, and just read some articles that interest you to sort of get engaged in the process. Then we have what's called Research Question 1, in which we discuss the topics. And these were all of the technologies that we considered this year for inclusion in the report. We discuss the topics, and then Research Question 2 is, look at the list of topics. Is there anything that's not on this list that we ought to be talking about? And this year we came up with a couple of things that had not been on our list originally, and we'll talk about a couple of those. Then research question 3 is identify the key trends that are going on in museums today. And RQ4 is identify the critical challenges that are going on in museums today. And the Horizon Report for Museums is basically looking at the intersection of technology for education and interpretation issues at museums. And then we vote. And it's a survivor-style voting. The first round, we choose the technologies, and in the second round for the shortlist, we vote people off the island. So this was the shortlist for this year, and it just came out a week and a half ago. For 1 year or less, electronic publishing, mobile apps, social media, tablet computing. How many of you who did my exercise voted electronic publishing off the island? Let me see a show of hands. You had to eliminate 2 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. How many of you voted mobile apps off? 1, 2. How many of you voted social media off? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many of you voted tablet computing off? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did you vote it off because you didn't like it, or you're just tired of hearing about it? No. Anyone want to share one of the technologies that they left on the group and why they thought they left it on? Got a compelling reason why you think this one topic is the most important topic on the list right now?
Was the massively open learning thing on that list? Sorry, I didn't see the list. On that list of ones you had at the start.
Oh, MOOCs.
Yeah.
You're interested in MOOCs.
Well, I did one, and it was brilliant.
You know, I don't even know that MOOCs, we can go back. Yeah, massively open online collection. Yeah, in the voting, it didn't make the,
Oh, really?
it didn't come up. So you would have had it on there. If you'd had your way, you would have voted for that. Okay, time to adoption 2 to 3 years. 3D printing, augmented reality, game-based learning, open content, and alternative licensing. How many of you voted 3D printing off? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you voted augmented reality? I have to count it loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Game-based learning? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Open content and alternative licensing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, you were just scratching your head. Okay. How many of you have any idea what open content and alternative licensing is? A couple of you. We're gonna talk about that. Good. That's good to hear. Okay, 4 to 5 years. I did the 4 to 5 year Horizon yesterday with my traditional art history students at Case Western Reserve University, which is 7 young women who could care less about technology in any form except for their iPhones. And when they looked at this paper and said, they looked at 4 to 5 years, they said, we don't know what any of those things are. So the Internet of Things, natural user interfaces, super rich online repositories, wearable technology. Who voted Internet of Things off? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Natural user interfaces. 1, 2, 3. You're double counting for me, aren't you? Super rich online repositories. 1, 2, 3, 4. And wearable technology. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you guys didn't vote on those, did you? Great. Okay, we're going to talk to you for a couple of minutes about the technologies from that list that did not make the cut. So what got cut from 1 year or less was electronic publishing and tablet computing. What got cut from 2 to 3 years was 3D printing and game-based learning. And what got cut from 4 to 5 years was wearable technology and super rich online repositories. And Alex and I decided we were going to do something that we've never done at a presentation before, that we got to pick one of the things that was thrown off and tell why we would have had it on the final list. Over to you.
All right. So I kind of hinted towards what one of those technologies was. It's 3D printing. I really believe that this magazine article that came out, the cover story on Wired Magazine, really shows a tipping point in terms of 3D printing, mostly in terms of cost. I think the cost has come down considerably, and we have, I'm a big fan of Liz Neely and been following the project that she's been working on at the Art Institute of Chicago doing 3D printing. And that led me to look at what Don Undine is doing at the Met. And I think those are 2 pioneers in the field of 3D printing. And I actually see that coming to Texas. I think the Met and the Kimball Art Museum are working on a project based around Bernini. So I see that as a technology that maybe the larger museums that have the budget to do that will start integrating very soon, because it provides accessibility. You know, for people to handle an object. I mean, do not touch is like the biggest thing in museums. That's the first thing you do when you're giving a tour. What do we not do? We don't touch things. But an opportunity to actually touch works, I feel, is really gets that kinesthetic learner, that haptic learner that needs to touch things. And I feel that that's a very strong component of that. And as well as accessibility for visually impaired folks, it's an opportunity to interact with artworks in a different way.
You'll find that Alex is a man of far fewer words than I am. Holly's pick, super rich online repository. I'm passionate about super rich online repositories. That image on the left is manuscript table 10 at Western Reserve Historical Society. I'm doing research in the archives on cultural attitudes of Americans towards museums before 1870. And so there, you're at my desk at manuscript, you can see the manuscript sign, you can see the table number, you can see my key to my locker because I can't have anything with me. It has to be in a locker, my laptop, and the one book I'm allowed to have at my table at a time. So if something interesting comes up in my reading or I need to look up something and it's not available via Google, I can get rid of the journal I'm currently working on, check something else out. Sometimes they don't have the something else I want, so I have to leave the archives and go over to one of the libraries in town. And so I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. I want super rich online repositories. I want Minority Report. I want Table 10 at Western Reserve Historical Society to be a flat tablet that I can pull up anything I want from any institution, anywhere in the world, at any time that I want it. I want to be able to combine videos and images. I want the table to tip up and down like my steering wheel does, so I can make it more comfortable for seeing things. I want to be able to annotate stuff. I want super rich online repositories available to me 24/7. And if I can have that, then I am still happily put my purse in the locker at Western Reserve Historical Society. That's what I want. Can't tell you how disappointed I was when it didn't make the cut. In fact, I got sent 2 documents where it looked like it did make the cut, and I got really excited, and oh well. So here's what we have. This is a comparison of the three, I was going to say the last three Horizon reports for museums, but there have only been three, so it's the three Horizon reports for museums. And you can see what we've looked at across the board for the past 3 years, what our advisory boards, and the content of the advisory board changes every year. And you can see, what's really interesting to me is, okay, mobile apps have made it all 3 years. Mobile apps are what's happening right now in museums. Some of you may be tired of them and not want to hear about them anymore, but the fact is that's what people are talking about in 1 year or less. Social media, a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about social media, but we're thinking about social media in a slightly different way than we did in 2010. So it's in a different, it's reappeared this year, but it's in kind of a different format. Tablets got booted off this year. You can see augmented reality, past 3 years, has been on that upcoming horizon. We know it's there, but for most of us, we're just not getting any practice in it. Location-based services in 2010 got slightly shaped differently as we had the discussion and turned into something called location-based services, location-based computing in 2011. And then, where the horizon really changes is when you get to that far horizon, what people think are on the far horizon. And the far horizon ones are usually where I'm sitting up the night before one of these, reading, trying to get my mind wrapped around. I had to do semantic web, which I think really only Coven should ever talk about. And I just spent time trying to wrap my mind really what was meant by the semantic web. So, we're going to spend the bulk of the rest of the time we have talking about the finalists and sort of getting some suggestions for projects from you all if you have them. And I'm going to turn over to Alex to discuss mobile apps.
Okay, so mobile apps. We've all experienced mobile apps. They're agile, relatively low cost, accessible software for smartphones and tablets. Why is it important to museums? The mobile marketplace continues to mature, and many museums are embracing the bring your own device philosophy. And I think that's the biggest drive for this, is that instead of a museum saying, okay, we need to buy these audio tour guides, we're like, well, what if we create the software and then enable visitors to come in and use an application to get some deeper information about the works on view. So I have 3 examples up here that are very different, but it kind of gives you a sense of where apps are going. The top left is the Denver Art Museum's DAM Scout. And this app enables visitors to access hidden layers of multimedia content pertaining to the exhibits that are on view. And it functions as a QR code reader, a quick response code reader, that reveals hidden layers of multimedia content pertaining to contextual information on that work. So what are the key characteristics about this one? I feel like it has lasting power because it's not specific to an exhibition, but it looks at, it's got a good strong infrastructure to it, so that you can change the QR codes out and continually update information. So I really like that because of the infrastructure of it. This app is free. It's for iPhones and iPads, and it came out in February of 2012. On the bottom left is MoMA's Art Lab, and I really like this one because it provides studio-based activities that connect to the collection. They really express experimentation and relate it to contextual historical information is woven throughout it. So one thing about mobile apps is that you can bring them on a device into your gallery space. That goes back to the do not touch. Well, the other thing is, you're told, well, you can't have pens in the gallery space, or you can't have certain types of writing objects or a certain size material. But if you have an iPad, you can create studio-based activities without creating a mess. I think that's a very important and powerful part of that. And I think with the Art Lab, it's also kind of using the ample space that the iPad provides to create a canvas. So with this, it's for youth. They can experiment with line drawing, collage, exquisite corpse, and shape poetry, and it's related to the collection. So the artists that they're looking at, inspired by, are like Matisse and Miro and Elizabeth Murray. So kind of looking at the geometric abstraction and some of those some different ways of engaging with that content. That app is $4.99, and it's for the iPad, of course, and that was released in June of 2012. To the right is one of my favorite ones. It's Maurizio Catalan. He's an Italian sculptor and installation artist. And this app is an extension of a temporary exhibition. It was this retrospective at the Guggenheim Museum. And it serves as a digital documentation of an exhibition. It contains an introduction by John Waters. How cool is that, gives some ideas about what's happening in the exhibition, works on view. You get a virtual installation. You can go through the installation through this app. And then there's interviews about different gallerists and curators who have worked with Maurizio and Maurizio himself, talking about the creative process. And strangely enough, the last one on there says toilet paper. I'm not quite sure what that is. So this is, it's interesting because compared to the other ones, it actually has kind of an age guide to it. It says 17 and up because of the type of the material that the artist covers. And I thought that was interesting because mostly you're trying to get towards a general audience or have school tours come in and engage with it. But this is actually something that, to me, functions kind of like a digital catalog. It was actually voted by the UK Sunday Times as the top 500 app, too. And that came out in November of 2011. It's for iPhones, iPads, Androids, and it's $3.99. Okay. Back to Holly. Oh, right. So has anyone here utilized mobile apps in your museum in terms of education or for collections or for marketing? Does anyone want to tell a little bit about how you're using it? I can come around.
I'm Ellie Wallace. I'm from Museum Victoria in Australia. The apps, we've produced a few apps now. We're taking a different tack. I work at a multidisciplinary museum with science, humanities, Indigenous cultures. We haven't done a tour app. What we've done instead is take the research of the scientists and the fantastic images that the scientists have been gathering up as they've been going out on field trips and collecting expeditions and things like that, and produce those as a field guide. So ours is a field guide to animals in the state of Victoria, which is where I live, and we've got about 700 species in the app, which is surprisingly good coverage. When you start using it, it's got surprisingly, the feedback we get from people using it is that it's surprisingly comprehensive. They can identify most of the things they see. We open source the code so that other institutions could take it and use it. So far, one institution has produced another little app using the code, and a museum in Auckland in New Zealand is just about to publish an app. We're just about to publish our second field guide, which is to a marine national park in Victoria. That'll have about 320 species in it. And the next big project is we're going to go national with that, and so we're collaborating with 6 other museums to produce field guides right around the country. So our approach has been not to draw users into the museum, but rather put museum science out there and say, hey, this is what people at the museum have been studying and researching. Go use it and make the most of the work that the museum's doing without having to even come in the door.
Very good, thank you. How about anyone else have a different example of how they're using it?
Hi, I'm Paige Danziger, and I don't currently work for a museum right now, but independently as a fine artist. And the morning I came here, I finished developing my very first app. And what it is it's a drawing opportunity engagement tool. The summer I was playing on my iPhone that game Draw Something. And I started drawing fine art images to answer all my game questions. So if I get rain, then I would draw like a Pissarro, right? And I thought, well, taking this outside of that just basic game that it's not mine, it's a different corporation's, how can I take this idea and turning it into a museum engagement opportunity? So I created a drawing app that if you could imagine coming into a museum as a visitor and seeing me drawing live on my iPhone or an iPad, live projected on the wall, you can then download on your smartphone a free URL to a website and download onto your phone the opportunity to watch it draw again, to look at the original work, to read content that I wrote about it, and then to access the live or the original work at its source. It's brand new. It's called Draw Art, and it's not really an app. It's just singularly on my cell phone at this time. But it's a beginning to hopefully a long road of more.
All right.
Thank you.
So coming to you soon. And I saw one in the back here.
Hi, I'm Keith Oswald. I'm Director of Educational Technology and Exhibit Development at the Children's Museum of Houston. We went in a completely different route. We did not develop our own app, so maybe this actually fits underneath your tablet better, but we are rather using third-party apps as facilitation tools on our floor. So we have floor facilitators who we call discovery guides. They are sign-out iPads, so this is not visitors getting iPads, but our facilitators get the iPads. We have found apps online that fit in well with our interactive components that we have as ways of digging deeper into the concepts that we're providing. So for example, if we are discussing angle of incidence equals angle of reflection, well, to kids it's like, wow, what? But the moment you pull out air hockey app, they immediately get the idea that, well, when I click it in at this angle, it bounces back out at the exact same angle. And so we quickly play a game of air hockey, 1 or 2 goes, and then we go back to the components. The idea is not to replace the hands-on nature, but rather to allow kids to dig deeper into what they're doing and to better understand what we're trying to provide without creating apps of our own. So that's been our take on that, and you can check it out at 21tech.org. That's an IMLS-funded project, and we're just about to start our 3rd year in it. So that's the 21-tech.org.
That sounds like a cool project. Anyone else before we move on?
Yep. I'm keeping us to time. Okay, I drew social media in the lottery. We are all of us prolific users, prolific creators of content. Now we create photographs, audio, video. We're uploading, as a world, we're uploading to the cloud by the billions of items. And what is interesting about social media is not so much the uploading of all of this stuff, but it's the producing, the commenting, and the classifying these media that have become just as important as more passive tasks of searching, reading, watching, and listening. And so I went out and found myself a few things that I was interested in. Art Clicks of the High Museum of Art. Brings together photo recognition and social media to provide visitors with an interactive experience. The artworks are automatically recognized, and the comments and the photos taken by visitors are shared as part of an online community. Up there in the far corner, underneath that beautiful Filippo Lippi, the Danish National Gallery, along with 9 other museums, just last month, launched what they call the Participatory Danish Museum. And basically what they're doing is using Twitter as a platform to actively engage patrons while they view artwork. And the idea is to create thematic connections across 9 museums in Denmark. So if you're looking at, sorry, I should know what that is. I can't see it. Oh, it's the meeting of Anna and Joachim, the parents of Mary. If you're looking at the meeting of Anna and Joachim, or First Kisses, or whatever you want to call this, it will also be able to help you out see where that same theme is used across the Danish museums. And then I brought in as just a different kind of thing. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, when we first started talking about social media in a big way, and before museums had people who were in charge of the social media strategic plans, I can remember sitting in boardrooms where people said, got to have a Facebook. And then they would sit and they would make one there. And I can remember actually looking at a museum. I was looking to see what other museums in town were doing in Cleveland before the Cleveland Museum of Art launched its Facebook page. And I was watching one of another museum in town, and I actually watched the number of people go down until they had, at some point, they had -1 friend. And first of all, I couldn't imagine how you could have -1 friend, but it's not exactly anything you want to see at your museum. And what a long way we've come to. This is the Museum of Fine Arts Boston's social media page, where it explains, and this is something that's pretty typical for big museums, where it explains all the different ways you can connect social media. We went through a period on museum websites when every conceivable icon we could think of we were putting on there, so you knew we were engaging in all these different activities. But I do believe that MFA Boston has chosen to educate its demographic, its visitors who may not be familiar with these tools in a rather clean and clear manner. And so that's why I put it up as an example of social media. You're younger than I am, so I'm going to let you do the microphone again. Anybody have any great social media applications they'd like to share? Eric, Joe, people I know?
We did an interesting...
Wait for the microphone so you get on the... So you're streaming live, Joe.
Hello. I think it's interesting. We did a couple of projects recently where we had a lot of content involved in those projects, and it was interesting how museums could use existing tools that are out there in social media to manage that content without having to build any new tools. So, for instance, the project we did was a big audio repository. So we used SoundCloud as our content management system, if you like. And what was nice about it was that the client can use, the museum can use that as a way of getting all that content in there, and it has this whole live that is shareable, and people can embed that stuff in blogs and they can talk about it, and it exists on SoundCloud. And then we were able to use their API to pull it in and visualize it in another way, And then they were using Twitter in interesting ways to tweet about items of the collection, and we were able to pull that in and merge them together and highlight it as artists of the day. And you can see how people could use Tumblr or Facebook or all these tools, and then their web presence or their visualization of that content is just their view on it. And this content exists in other ways that are just hitting people that maybe aren't interested in coming to your website, but are interested in being kept up to date on things.
Are you going to tell us what the museum is, or would you have to kill us all?
Oh no, it was for the ICA. It was a audio Soundworks project.
Okay. Somebody else got a social media project that they're all excited about? Nope. Oh, yes, we do.
Well, it's actually, I was excited until a few days ago, and I don't know if people have noticed that Facebook has drastically reduced the access to your posts. But anyway, last year I ran a photo contest for young photographers aged 7 to 17 in the province of BC to take photos of nature. And it was done strictly a small budget of $500, done on a third-party platform. People would upload their photo through Facebook. The kids who did upload the photos, there's about 45 of them, were really excited about it because I'd sort of created the prize, the value for the upload was that you came in and you met with museum staff and you sort of acted as a museum photographer for the day, picked something out of the collection, photographed it in the studio, and then learned how to do the large format printing. And it just was a really nice way to engage directly with social media through the parents and the kids, and actually have translate that into a visit and then a strong connection, create new members, give them memberships as well. So we're repeating that this year.
Great, new members and future patrons. Yeah. And I'm going to pick on Paco because I just saw him walk in the room. I don't, what's the name of the wonderful advertising campaign that the Met did?
It's Time We Met?
Yeah, It's Time We
Yeah.
Met. Can you talk about It's Time We Met for just a minute?
Yeah, it's a yearly program where the Met collaborates with our advertising agency, and we're just leading into our 5th iteration this year. And last year what we did is we really tried to bring on a series of, I would hate to say celebrities, but people who stand out in the public's mind, and have them go through and kind of select a series of objects from across the collection and within a certain theme, and say, this is who I am, this is why I come back to the Met, and really also then invite people to go through and create their own collections along that line, just kind of as a starting point. But of course, it's an advertising campaign, a marketing campaign that has a very strong physical presence on the streets of New York and stuff. So it's interesting. We learn something every year about what draws people in, what doesn't, and it's an ongoing thing that's going to happen every year. So.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you. Anybody else have a social media experiment that they want to experiment?
Thank you again. So back to draw art. I started drawing these pictures earlier this summer, and what I would do is I would Instagram it, and then it would cross-tweet on Twitter and to Facebook. And what I found was that a lot of people really enjoyed looking at these drawings. And I started working, there was a young girl in California who goes by the name of Clocks, and she would really like my drawings. And she was not really confident in herself, and certainly not in any of her drawings. And I worked with her as a mentor through Instagram to become more confident in doodling. And I tell her all the time, make sure when you're in school that you doodle through math class, and you doodle through all your classes, and it'll help you think. Well, now she's become so confident in her works, and it's just one example of this one girl that she's asked all about, well, what now does it take to have a career in museums? And she's engaged in her art classes, and she's using social media herself, and she'll draw a picture in math class, let's say, and then Instagram it and put up a whole bunch of hashtags, and if you like this, then connect to that. So she's taking kind of my example and really turning it into what a 15-year-old student would play with. But it's been exciting to watch somebody else take just, a little bit of good job, keep on doing. A little bit of positive reinforcement goes a really long way to teens and youth. So, yeah, so social media is a perfect opportunity for mentorship.
There you go. We're at 5:20, so it's over to you for augmented reality, year 3.
All right. So augmented reality. So what is augmented reality? It's been on the Horizon Report the past, 3 years? This is the 3rd time it's on there. So it's a very persistent technology, but it's still on the 2 to 3 year horizon. I feel like every year it's been on the 2 to 3 year horizon, right? But basically it's an interpretation layer over what we see with our naked eye. It reveals what we could not otherwise see, interact with, or possibly imagine. Interfaces include smartphones, tablets, monitors, and hopefully glasses soon. I think that's going to be the point where I think augmented reality is going to tip. But it's basically a window into a digital world. So I picked 3 examples of augmented reality. They're kind of very different, but kind of give you a sense of what direction they go. The first one is the LACMA Projectorator by Will Pappenheimer. So this is really interesting because the artists were invited to respond to an exhibition. And so Will was inspired by Gustav Klutzis, who was a Russian avant-garde artist who was interested in the idea of the public square. So what Will did was he transformed the interstitial space, the in-between places, on the LACMA campus. And he created these colorful sculptural funnels So kind of interested in creating engagement within a space that's really, usually passed by. So he created a network of these sculptural funnels, and it's very much based on that location. So it's, in a sense, it's a sculptural installation that exists only virtually, and is seen through this window of your phone. And so that's a free iPhone and Android app, and it was released in July. The one on the top left is the Museum of London, the Street Museum, which I think is a really interesting way of connecting the present and the past, which is a powerful part of augmented reality. Basically, you find a destination on the map, or you use your GPS to locate a site that the museum created some context for. You basically hold up the camera on the same location, and you can view a layer of the past over the present. So gives you a sense of engaging with that space and how it's evolved over the years. And I think that's something that you see a lot of, and I think it has a lot of potential with like historical sites where there's ruins, and you could get a sense of what that actually looked like in its original condition. So it's interesting because it's a geolocation, it's outside, and it extends the collection that's traditionally inside of the gallery out into the environment, out into the space where that image was taken. And that's a free iPhone and Android app, and that's been around since 2010. But I like that because it gives you an example of that connecting the past and the present. And on the bottom right is the Augsburg display cabinet. That's something that's been explained before, but I think what's interesting about that is that you can experience this cabinet via 3D object overlay on a live video feed. So as you can see there, she has her webcam, and she has a marker on that page, and so that marker becomes a manipulated object. It enables to interact with a previously functional object that is inaccessible because of its fragility or the nature of the preservation. So that kind of augmented reality gives you access to something that you may not be able to touch and open up drawers and look at the back side, look at the underneath side. So that's, I think, an interesting part of augmented reality is that it kind of it stretches out the use of your collection, and you don't have to worry about it getting damaged. And that's a free thing. You just go to the site, and you can do that by just printing out that marker on a piece of paper. And that came out in May of 2010. And that's Paco's project, I understand. So very cool. So is anyone using augmented reality? It's in the 2 to 3 year horizon.
Which is such a misnomer, because museums are by definition in the augmented reality business. That's what we do. It's just we're doing it now with tools and technologies as opposed to labels or the most fantastic educator you've ever seen. I just want to get that in.
Well, that's right.
We got lots of people.
That's a key part of missions is interpretation, and layering interpretation is a natural fit.
I'm Sean Mummert from Cincinnati Museum Center and National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. We recently had Google Maps come and map the interior of our building, so that if you're using Google Maps within Android, you have interior navigation of our building, which is actually incredibly useful for our building because it's a historic train station, and it's famously, we get a lot of complaints online. Generally, the complaint that we get is the museum is too small, which means that people miss the right turn down into the lower level and thought the museum was over. So we're actually pretty happy with the way that worked out. It's a kind of bringing a navigational technology and into the museum itself and helping people navigate within a more conventional tool.
Do we have any other examples?
This isn't something I'm doing, but since they're not here, the Franklin Institute had a National Science Foundation grant to develop what they call the Ariel project, ARIEL, which is a open source programming language that incorporates and connect Arduino, and other electronic devices to make it a very simple programming station. And they've actually developed a couple of augmented reality pieces utilizing these sorts of things. So it might be something worth exploring. We're going to start looking at it ourselves. So just to put that out there. So the aerial project.
Diane, was EMT? That was a sub-right. Turn around and talk to Diane there. Oops. EMP was an augmented reality.
Oh, yeah, totally, right.
Can you say a little bit about that?
12 years ago, I guess, right?
Yeah, but the issue is, it keeps appearing in it like it's 3 to 4 years out.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and I think 12 years ago, this is like, wow, jogging my memory, thanks for, so 12 years ago, I mean, I think EMP did one of the first instances of bookmarking, and that was a good example of sort of having multi-layers of information that you could experience in the moment or then later explore online. And, there's still talk about, wouldn't it be neat if we could, and
Better tell them what EMP, just in case somebody doesn't know.
What's that?
Better tell them what EMP is.
Oh, it's the EMP Museum. It used to be called Experience Music Project. It's still here. It's just very different now than it was in 2000. So I mean, and we did a variety of things that were just sort of having people interact with on certain planes, different objects, and different interactive experiences, where you sort of try to get people to forget about the computer, basically, and have a different kind of an experience. On stage was like that, where you get to play in a simulated rock band.
And I saw a hand over here.
Yeah. Oh, 2. Yeah.
2.
Sorry.
That's fine.
So this is it was actually a sort of internal company project. I work for a small interaction design agency, and just for a holiday card, we used augmented reality as a musical interface. So you could print out a number of different symbols, sort of like the one on the bottom right there, that you're holding up a piece of paper in front of the computer, but each of them would play a different note. And so it's interesting, it's not just a way to display 3D models or to overlay information, but it's actually a really handy tool for natural user interfaces, because it would be really complicated to track somebody's hand and what they're doing, but if they're holding the augmented reality symbol, suddenly you can get a good picture of how they're moving around too. So,
Coven back there.
Yeah, actually, our mobile app at Denver Art Museum is a sort of dumbed-down version of this, in that what we were looking to do is basically attach information to sort of, oh, hey, there's that. There it is. To attach information to sort of arbitrary locations and other things in the building. And we actually did try to make it work with LayR and a couple of other Junio, some augmented reality platforms. And we just couldn't make it work, given that our building is skinned with titanium and there's lots of problems. But so we ended up using a QR code marker sort of based model, which actually ended up being far more reliable for us, and allowed us to do fun things like put QR codes on curators' backs during events, or hide QR codes under railings just to see what people would do if they'd find them, And so we're looking at ways that we can actually just sort of tack information to sort of arbitrary places, and we're looking to probably start moving that outside of the building into the city at large as well.
Thanks.
All right. Lori Bird, do you want to go woot, woot, woot? Open content and alternative licensing. Information is everywhere, and the challenge is to make effective use of it. So open content embraces not only the sharing of information, but the sharing of pedagogies and experiences as well. And the movement towards open content reflects a growing shift in the way academics in many parts of the world are conceptualizing education to a view that is more about the process of learning than traditional learning has been. It's more about the process than it is about the information conveyed in the courses. And part of the appeal of open content is that it presents a cost-effective alternative to textbooks and other materials. And in this sense, the open content movement has fostered the exploration of alternative licensing. And that's why this is part of this. It's open content and alternative licensing, because licensing is just a nightmare. If you work at a museum, if you work at an interactive agency, licensing is a nightmare. And so what we've tried to do in this particular section is link the two. And the two examples that I brought, and maybe Lori Bird will want to talk. Maybe Lori will want to talk about these. So one of these is GLAM. And GLAM is my favorite new acronym of the year. GLAM is Galleries, Archives, Libraries, and Museums. And I suppose that means we need to ask Gunter Weibel to write an article called Silence of the Glam, now to replace Silence of the Lamb earlier. And Google Art Project. Laura, do you want to talk about GLAM? I would feel bad talking about GLAM with you sitting here. This is Lori Bird Phillips, everyone.
Thanks, Alex. So GLAM is actually a community of Wikipedians, volunteer Wikipedians, all around the world that work together to help museums, libraries, archives share their resources with Wikipedia. And so we're actually having a session next. So if you want to learn all about it, you can join us there. But that's the general gist.
The other example I put up there was Google Art Project, as an example of content and licensing. And I have a third slide that I've snuck in Rogue, although I did tell Alex about it, because anybody in the room who is over 45 years old may recognize this person. My husband and I don't want to see the Johnny Depp Dark Shadows movie until I've refreshed my mind. And when in the 1960s, you hoped your mother was out of the house when you came home from school so you could watch Dark Shadows, because generally you weren't allowed to watch it because it would give you nightmares. And it was sort of the first real vampire television show that was on. And so earlier in the summer, I said to my husband, before we go see this movie, why don't we watch a couple of Dark Shadows episodes? You know how many Dark Shadows episodes there were? 1,300. My husband and I watch 5 a night. We've watched 400 since the summer. And sort of like 25 episodes into it, I discovered the Dark Shadows Wikia that has a page for every single one of the 1,335 episodes and includes the opening text and a description of the events, continuity errors, and bloopers. And I was just like, I don't know whether I'm obsessed or this is the most wonderful thing ever, but I think this is the power of open content, that I have become a commentator on Dark Shadows. Anyway, anybody have examples of open content and licensing, alternative licensing projects they would like to share? Hey, B&A, you have so please, Concha. And introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Concha from the National Museum of Art in Barcelona. This year we released the text of our website under Creative Commons, and also a bunch of images. And now we have a Wikipedian in residence, and all those texts and images were used by the Wikipedia. And we do that because we believe that we are a public museum, a public funded museum. So we believe that since we are public funded, our content should be made available to the public. But another consequence of that we didn't know at the beginning is that since we uploaded so many images at the Wikipedia, one of our masterpieces, which is a Romanesque mural painting, had in just 1 month 800,000 views. Then, when could we have reached so many views in our poor website? Never. So I think I say that because some of the museums may be encouraged to also share their content or to release their content open, not just because they believe in open things, but because there is a clear benefit of doing that. Thank you.
Eric,
sorry,
go ahead.
We are also this year on the Google Art Project. I mentioned this because you mentioned. And it has been an excellent experience for us because it has given us a worldwide dissemination of our collection. Thank you.
It really is amazing to me that I continue to read blog posts from people who say, who still seem to believe that the point of Google Art Project is to replace museum visits. You know, and I think we've been having this conversation for 30 years. Can we not just accept as fact that it's not about replacement, it's about sort of supplementation, perhaps?
To that, I would say go to Mike Edson's Google Art Project on Trial presentation on Saturday.
There we go, an advertisement.
We're hearing about this for an hour and a half.
There was a woman back there who wanted, and I was kind of hoping Eric would say something about the VNA's images online too.
We have also released some of our web pages on Creative Commons. We have a mcn.edu. It's an online encyclopedia that's there's 2 different flavors of Creative Commons licensing for that. We've just released a U.S. Dakota War website, and that will be released in Creative Commons as well. We'll be adding that in. And another thing we're actually working on, we've just released our first digital chapter of a textbook aimed at middle school, and it's about the Civil War. And we are now thinking, it's an iPad app, and it's free if anybody wants to look up men in the Civil War and try it out and give us feedback. But we're thinking about actually making an EPUB version of it as well, and putting it in iTunes University, because we know that our elementary school teachers are taking our content, they're scanning pages, they're remixing and reusing it according to their classroom needs. So why are we making it hard for them? So it's a discussion that's really good to change the way we do printed text in our organization as well.
Yeah, and you're from?
Minnesota Historical Society.
And I'd like to ask everybody who's given me some sort of project that they're proud of, if I could have a business card with a link to it. If you've got a link, that would be great at the end of the session. Coven.
I think it's worth mentioning, this isn't a specific project, but I think part of the trend here is actually more practical than altruistic. I think a lot of the original impetus for doing this alternative licensing was altruistic, but as we're starting to find that it's like, okay, we're getting so little revenue for the amount of time it takes us to do all of this licensing that it's actually more cost effective to just sort of let things be freely licensed, and the community value of having the stuff out there is so much bigger than the monetary value. That I think that's a sort of important part of this that gets a little bit lost, in that I think over the next few years, like, that's probably going to end up being the real driver towards alternative licensing, is that as we shut down our rights and reproductions departments or slim them down to, you know, somebody working half time, that's going to be where the real impetus is here.
And there's two other aspects to that. First of all, I'd like to refer you to the J. Paul Getty Foundation's Online Scholarly Catalog Initiative interim report that came out. It's available online. It's called the OSCI Project. If you search OSCI Project, you'll find it. And legal counsel for the Getty wrote an appendix in that about these legal issues that face museums. And one of the issues that's really critical is if my museum is borrowing from your museum and your museum is borrowing from my museum, we're both paying rights and reproductions to each other, and it doesn't make any sense. Another older reference, but still old but goodie, is Ken Hama's Public Domain Images in an Age of Mechanical Reproducibility, which you'll find online as well. And that discusses just exactly what Cohen was talking about. We use this excuse that our rights and reproductions departments are revenue source, and we're just not getting, in most cases, we're not getting that much money from it. Yes, one more over there, and then we have 2 more technologies to go. Thanks, Alex, for being mic man.
Ellie Wallace again from Museum Victoria. What we did in producing a website, which was the Port Phillip Bay Taxonomic Toolkit, sounds like a bit of a dry website, but we used it as a way of helping the curatorial and collection management staff to get their heads around open licensing. One of the big issues that we face is, and I'm sure many museums face, is the legacy issue of just trying to work out what licensing would be applicable to different images within our collection when we want to put them online. So what we did with the Port Phillip Bay website was to individually license each image. So we actually went through and assessed whether the image was in the public domain, whether it was copyright. If it was copyright, Was it copyright to the museum, so we could license it how we liked? If it was copyright but not to the museum, did we have to go back to the copyright holder, and how could we contact them? So we went through that process for this one website, just to show as a sort of test case to the curatorial and collection management staff what was going to be required to do it on a larger scale. The other couple of things that we also tested on that website, so all of the content that we could license with Creative Commons licensing, we did on that website. We also licensed the text openly with a Creative Commons license as well, with just a CC BY license. The other thing that we did was the curatorial staff write a lot of the text, and so they were quite keen to be attributed and be acknowledged for that text writing and that content. So we put an acknowledgement on every single page for the author of that page. And the last thing that we did was, in response to feedback that lots of teenagers in particular, looking for information on the web to do school projects and things, find it difficult to know how to cite pages. So we put a citation on every page. So if you've used information off this page, here's how you cite it. And the feedback that we've had is that people do, particularly people looking for information on school projects and things like that, find it very useful to have a very clear citation that they can just whack straight into their bibliography.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to natural user interfaces.
Natural user interfaces, or NUI, as I like to call it. So we've had 40 years of mouse and keyboard. And over the past few years, we've gone to the tablets and to pinching and swiping. And those are more natural ways of interacting with the web. They're alternative input devices, basically, that allow computers to recognize and interpret natural physical gestures. So, I mean, there's tapping, swiping, pinching, hand-arm movements, body motion, eye motion, voice. So these are a means to control your interaction with mobile or web-based material. And so this is on the 4 to 5 year horizon. It's beginning to get more and more sophisticated as we go along. And how it's being used in museums, I mean, I use this very close example of the Vancouver Aquarium and their interactive multi-touch table. And then this morning at the keynote, what's the name of that project? Tag art. That's another way of manipulating and getting access to something other than a keyboard and a mouse. So at the Vancouver Museum, they have an interactive multi-touch table. And so that's a way of interacting with that material using swipes and gestures. Do you have any examples of that in museums? I mean, I'm seeing it become a little bit more prevalent, basically through iPads and tablets. But can you think of any examples that you might know?
So here locally, if you have a chance to go into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Visitor Center, the whole last gallery is filled with that type of stuff. And we'll be doing a presentation on that tomorrow afternoon sometime, I believe.
At the Museum of Science in Boston, we're starting to look at, we're actually working with a team at IDEM who did this multi-touch table as well as our own in-house programmers to look at this natural user interface and how to make it accessible for people with disabilities. So people who are blind and people who have limited mobility, it's a real issue. So we're starting to look at audio layering and really easy swipe interfaces that people can use to take advantage of this new technology in a way that makes it work for a wider variety of people. And as long as we're doing session plugs, I'm going to be talking about it on Saturday morning at 10:30 as well.
No, please do. I'll be at all of these.
Joe over there. Joe, introduce yourself. You didn't do that last time.
Hi, this is Joe Baskerville from COGAP.
And it's not a multi-touch table. And I talked about this in Austin a couple of years ago, so some people may have seen it. That we did a project for the British Library for their Magnificent Maps exhibition that they did, where we wanted an interface to let people explore the maps and zoom them and get more detail from the scans that we had. But we didn't want to let the interface get in the way. And we had such a mixed audience of people coming in that we didn't know what their technical skills were. So we actually developed these magic magnifying glasses that people would use. So when they walked up to a map, there was a magnifying glass by the side of it, and they just picked that up. And as they moved the magnifying glass over the map, it would magnify that area and zoom it in so they could get more detail on it. And more than one person could use it at once, and they weren't interfering with each other. And there were hot spots that you could roll over, and they would speak it out. And it was just a lovely system. It was completely invisible. The technology was just hidden away completely. And to the point where people, they'd have a digital version of it on these big tables, and then the real version on the wall. And people would take the magnifying glasses and walk over to the wall and try and use it, and they couldn't. It wouldn't work. So it was just a nice, natural user interface that really worked.
I'm gonna call time so we can move on. All right. The Internet of Things. This is like the semantic web to me, where I just have to get my brain wrapped around. So the Internet of Things is really sort of a shorthand for network-aware smart objects that connect the physical world with the world of information. And a smart object has four key attributes. It's small, and thus it's easy to attach to almost anything. It has a unique identifier. It has a small store of data or information, and it has a way to communicate that information to an external device on demand. Anyone like to challenge me on that or do a better description of it than me? I'm perfectly happy because I'm looking out in the audience and I know there are people who are better at this than I am. And the Internet of Things really extends that concept by using TCP/IP as the means to convey the information, thus making objects addressable and findable on the Internet. I'm going to show you the two examples I have, but I was telling the students in class, when I was trying to describe this in class, I know what the applications are now, but the application I can really see in the future for the Internet of Things is bringing together a group of Rembrandt paintings and having the paintings themselves discuss whether or not they're Rembrandts. Because I think we're almost at the point where you could do with sensors, where you could identify, we know in certain cases, maybe Rembrandt's not the best example, that here are the 10 characteristics that the autographed hand by Leonardo da Vinci, we actually know that every painting that was clearly his has these 10 features. And if the paintings came into the gallery and talked to one another, the one that had 10 features could say, you know what, you only got 3 of these features. I don't think you're an actual Leonardo. So, and I feel like museums are a little hesitant technology exists to help us understand what's real and what's not real. And this is particularly important in North America, where in the 19th and 20th century, people went over to Europe and were sold whatever anyone wanted. If Americans wanted a picture by Filippo Lippi, they were sold a painting by Filippo Lippi. It didn't matter that he'd never been anywhere near it. So I'm looking forward to the Internet of Things helping us discover what we really have in North America. But real people who are doing the Internet of Things, here are 2 projects. COSM, where the Internet of Things is being built. COSM is a platform that connects devices and apps so they can store and exchange data. And developers are using it to create their own smart products. So the Brighton Fishing Museum, do you know this? Have you? What? I know, it's one room, and it's the Brighton Fishing Museum is one room, and there's nobody there. There's nobody who runs the gallery. It's this one room, and some of the some students from, I think it's the Brighton Science College or. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. From the Brighton Science College, got this assignment, and in 2 months they put together this project for the Brighton Fishing Museum. And basically it's a little game where you go in and you get a card, and you take one of these cards and go to a computer terminal and type in your name so the card knows who you are. And it's a very simple gaming technique they got. They went out and they picked some characters, and the story is that a little girl named Lucy is her mother's talking on the cell phone, And they're walking down the street in Brighton, and her mother is so engaged with the cell phone that Lucy sort of disappears and discovers the Brighton Fishing Museum. And when she gets in there, she meets this elderly kind of creepy creature, or creepy man, who says, "Oh, you've become a time traveler, a time tourist, and you have to find another tourist to help you get out of the time trap that you're in." And so there are these kiosks, and you take your card, you put your name in, and then the card knows who you are, and it sends you to various stations in the Brighton Fishing Museum. And what I love about this is when you get to a station, Lucy will say, I need to know when the first fishing boat, was launched in 1710. I'm making up an example right now. And it will kick you off the system. And you have to go and find that piece of information. And if you try to go back, if you already know the answer, if you try to go back within a short time frame, the system will tell you, you haven't had enough time to find that answer. And so it sort of makes you look at the objects there in the museum. And again, I'm not sure that this is the best example of how the Internet of Things is going to work in the big world, but I think it's a great, if you go and you read the little 28-page document that describes this is a project with heart. And next time you're in Brighton, you got to go. So you're going to go? You're going to go when you go home? Yeah, okay, both of you. Good. Glad to hear. 5 minutes. Anybody have an Internet of Things? I knew Coven was going to have an Internet of Things. You could do an elevator speech for the semantic web too. That would be helpful because I just can't get it right.
Actually, there's a great example of the Internet things taking shape on the 3rd floor right now. The crew from Santa Fe and from California are building a pneumatic tube messaging system so you can send paper messages back and forth to each other. But they're using Arduinos to basically control things. So in essence, they have two what appear to be just like old school sort of steampunk looking boxes that are actually aware of each other and can actually route physical messages from one box to the other. So it's kind of an interesting example of something where when you're looking at it and you're watching it, you're not thinking, oh, this is data aware, I could actually send messages, like command messages to it, but you actually can. So they'll be happy to talk with you about it and happy to have you help them solder some stuff together. So go.
Right there.
Dan, I see you're sitting in the front row, so if you want to add to this, but at the Minnesota History Center, the Unboring Museum, we are building a game where students will be using an iPod Touch to interact with the physical environment. And by completing certain quests, they will cause a transaction to occur with an Arduino board that will cause an explosion in an iron mine.
Excellent. All the way across the room, of course.
This one actually is a museum project. I'm Katie. I'm from a company called TellArt. We're a small firm in Rhode Island. But we just finished a project with the Science Museum in London. I know Dave was here, but I think he's gone now, called the Web Lab. So we worked with Google Creative Labs, and it's all about physical-digital connection. So in the museum, you can go into the museum. You have a little card sort of like that, so you can keep track of stuff. And you do things like go up to a camera, and it takes your picture, and then it shows you that it's turning your picture into a line drawing, and then it tells a robot to draw that line drawing in a big sand tray. And then you get a picture of your picture in sand, and it's kind of attached to your card, which you can take home and online and collect it later. But then online, so there's 4 of these robots that are drawing museum visitors, but then there's 4 of them that are drawing online visitors. So you go to the website, and it takes your picture, and it does the same thing, and then you can watch it on live video being drawn. And there's a couple of these different experiments, but they're all sort of about this back and forth. So it's not exactly the objects sort of being self-aware quite yet.
But if you got the robot a license to perform marriages, think about it.
Between the online and virtual users?
You could marry someone. You could marry. Anyway, I'm just thinking. All right. We have 3 minutes left, and so I'm not going to go over the key trends or the significant challenges. I want to go to next steps. First of all, the next step is the report itself is going to launch. What's the day of your workshop?
December 5th in Austin.
December 5th. So on December 5th, you can go online. You type in Horizon Museum Horizon Museum 2012, and the report will be available downloading. We're still considering our print run. Haven't made any decisions about that yet. We need your help. Your image here, if you have a picture that you think would be a great cover for a Horizon report, a photograph that you've taken, not one you found on the web, but a
This
photograph
was
you've
last
taken.
year's.
Yes, this is. Oh, there it is, yes. Send it to communications@nmc.org, and if it's picked, we'll give you credit for it. And then we have this, hello, what's in a name? We are happy, Lori Bird, with open content alternative licensing. We aren't happy with that name for that topic. Anybody have a great overarching name for open content alternative licensing right off the top of your head? If not, contact me if you can think of one, like Brangelina. Open Authority. Is that yours?
Yeah, I presented on this last night.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Open Authority, is that what it is?
Be there.
I was on a plane.
How about free stuff?
Free stuff, Open Authority. Okay.
I would put in a vote for Open Authority.
Open Authority. We're just going to send that note to Larry and say Open Authority. Send us your great projects. You're going to give me business cards with links on them. If you choose not to do it that way, there's a big old long link there, http, NMC News. Send me an email and I'll send you that link. The short list and preview document for the finalists is available online right now. You can sign up for a 2013 advisory board by going to http://go.nmc.org/horizon-nominate. Love to have you on a board. And thank you. Got a lot of great projects. We've enjoyed speaking with you.
And those of you that got your assignment on the way in, if you could drop it off at the door, I'll be there to collect it for you. Thank you for participating today.